Remember when Michael Corleone kissed Fredo and said, "I know it was you"? Behind that Pacino saga sat a script its star nearly refused and critics called a mess. Today we're counting down 15 weird facts you never knew about The Godfather Part II. Number 15. Here is something most people never think about when they see that title card on screen. Paramount Pictures did not want to call this film The Godfather Part II. The studio believed audiences would not pay to revisit a story they had already seen, and a numbered sequel felt like an admission that the original was unfinished. Francis Ford Coppola fought that position and won for one specific reason. He wanted both films eventually edited into one continuous saga tracing the Corleone dynasty from Sicily to the American underworld. That ambition gave us the Part II label, which was a genuine first in American studio cinema. No major Hollywood film had ever used a numbered title this way. Mario Puzo had begun drafting a follow-up as early as December 1971, working under the early title, The Death of Michael Corleone. By the time that script evolved into what Coppola filmed, the structure had changed completely, built around two parallel timelines rather than a single forward-moving story. Coppola explained in his DVD commentary that his guiding idea was to juxtapose the rise of the family under Vito with its slow destruction under Michael, two men at the same crossroads making opposite choices. Paramount considered the concept too ambitious. Coppola considered it the only reason to return. The title they settled on was a small, stubborn victory that the entire sequel industry later borrowed without acknowledgement. Think about that the next time you see Part 2 anywhere. Number 14. Robert De Niro was not a stranger to the franchise when he took the role of young Vito. He had auditioned for the original Godfather in 1971, competing for the role of Sonny Corleone before losing it to James Caan. Francis Ford Coppola brought him back after seeing his performance in Martin Scorsese's Mean Streets, recognizing exactly what he needed for the younger version of the character. What followed was one of the most meticulous transformations in American film history. De Niro watched the original Godfather repeatedly, studying Marlon Brando's mannerisms in close detail. He visited the same dentist Brando had used and had a smaller version of Brando's cheek-filling dental appliance made for himself, creating physical continuity between the two portrayals across decades. He also traveled to Sicily and worked with a dialect coach to learn Sicilian from scratch, because nearly every line he delivers in the flashback sequences is spoken in that language. According to various accounts from the production, the mustache De Niro wears as young Vito was settled by a coin toss during a creative discussion about the character's look. His restraint and precision were rewarded when he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor, making him and Brando the only two actors in film history to win an Oscar for playing the same character. Every quiet glance was a deliberate echo of Brando, built from the ground up, detail by detail. Number 13. Hyman Roth is one of the most quietly terrifying figures in American cinema, a frail old man who radiates lethal patience with every labored breath. The performance belongs to Lee Strasberg, the legendary acting teacher who founded the Actors Studio and trained generations of American performers. This was his first major film role, and he was 73 years old when he took it. The casting came through Al Pacino, one of Strasberg's most prominent former students. Pacino suggested his old teacher to Francis Ford Coppola, who had first approached director Elia Kazan about the part. Kazan declined and pointed Coppola toward Strasberg as well, which turned into one of those moments where everyone in the room agrees on the same answer. Once Strasberg joined the production, his health declined during the shoot, and the script was adjusted so that Roth's physical deterioration became part of the character rather than a problem to hide. The character was modeled on real-life mobster Meyer Lansky, who reportedly watched the film and called Strasberg afterward to complain that he should have been made more sympathetic. The portrayal had landed uncomfortably close to the truth. Strasberg earned an Academy Award nomination for the role, which meant he lost the Oscar to Robert De Niro, his own former student, in the same film. Hollywood rarely produces ironies that clean, and this one arrived completely by accident. Number 12. The scene where Kay confronts Michael with the truth about her pregnancy is one of the film's most devastating moments. She delivers the revelation with controlled fury. It was not a miscarriage. It was an abortion, a deliberate choice she made to prevent another son from being raised inside his father's world. The line lands like a blade and completely reframes the relationship between them. The original script had written it as a miscarriage. The shift came from Talia Shire, who played Connie Corleone and read an early draft of the scene. Shire pointed out to her brother Francis Ford Coppola that an abortion would cut far deeper than a miscarriage because it transformed Kay from a woman who suffered a loss into a woman who made an act of deliberate defiance. Coppola heard her out and changed the line before production on that sequence began. Talia Shire's own role expanded significantly in Part 2, moving Connie from the emotionally broken wife of the first film toward a harder, more calculating presence. Diane Keaton, who plays Kay, mentioned in interviews that she drew some of Kay's composed exterior from observing Eleanor Coppola, the director's wife, during production. A single word, suggested by an actress who was also the director's sister, changed the entire emotional weight of one of the film's most important confrontations. Watch the exchange knowing that, and Kay becomes someone completely different. Number 11. The Havana sequences in The Godfather Part II are some of the most visually lush in the film. The city at the edge of revolution, the New Year's Eve party in Batista's world falling apart, Michael calculating his exit while history catches up around him. All of it feels genuinely Cuban. None of it was filmed in Cuba. The 1950s Havana the production needed was politically inaccessible, so the company moved to Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic to build it from scratch. The reason that particular location was chosen had less to do with creative geography and more to do with corporate real estate. Paramount's parent company at the time was Gulf Plus Western, a conglomerate run by Chairman Charles Bloodhorn, who held substantial business interests in the Dominican Republic. Bloodhorn was actively interested in developing the country as a film production hub, and his influence steered the Cuba sequences to a location that happened to benefit his own portfolio. The National Palace in Santo Domingo stood in for Batista's presidential compound, and the El Embajador Hotel provided the terrace where Roth delivers his famous birthday speech. The result is a Havana constructed from Dominican colonial architecture, dressed and lit to approximate a city the crew could not enter. Knowing that Bloodhorn's boardroom ambitions quietly determined where an entire act of this film was set, makes those scenes read a little differently. The production's choices were not always made by artists. Sometimes they were made by real estate. Number 10. The Sicilian sequences in The Godfather Part II are visually golden, exactly the warm Mediterranean light you would expect from a story set in a land of ancient grudges and olive groves. Getting that footage turned out to be one of the most frustrating location experiences of the entire production. The plan was to spend approximately 11 days in Sicily, gather the footage needed for the young Vito flashbacks, and move on. Instead, the shoot stretched to roughly 50 days. The problem was the sky. The crew arrived expecting reliable Sicilian sunshine and found overcast conditions that refused to clear. A local eventually explained that the proximity to Mount Etna created weather patterns that could hold gray skies in place for weeks, which was information the production had not gathered before committing to the schedule. Cinematographer Gordon Willis, who had built the Godfather saga's visual language around precise control of light, now found himself waiting out a volcano. Francis Ford Coppola's son, Roman Coppola, played the child version of Sonny during those sequences, and his hair was curled into the correct period shape every day for shoots that kept getting postponed by weather. The extra weeks added cost and time simultaneously, compounding pressure on a production already running well beyond its original Sicilian window. Every sun-drenched frame of young Vito's revenge took weeks of cloudy volcanic waiting to earn. Number 9. Frank Pentangeli is one of the most memorable figures in The Godfather Part II, the old-world capo who drinks too much, laughs too loud, and eventually walks into a Senate hearing room to either destroy Michael or save him. He feels like he has always been part of the Corleone story. He was not. Pentangeli did not exist in the original plan for the film. He was invented because a contract negotiation fell apart. The role was written for Clemenza, the beloved capo played by Richard Castellano in the first Godfather. Castellano and the producers reached an impasse. Coppola's account is that Castellano wanted more money and demanded script approval, with his wife writing his dialogue. Coppola refused both conditions. Castellano later offered his own version, saying he refused because he did not believe Clemenza would ever turn against Michael. Whichever account you find more convincing, the outcome was the same. Clemenza was written out as having died off screen and a new character was built in his place. Michael V. Gazzo, a playwright and actor, stepped into the role of Pentangeli and earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. The character was partly inspired by the real testimony of Joe Valachi, who appeared before a Senate committee in 1963. A salary dispute accidentally gave the film one of its greatest characters, and the entire Senate hearing spine that drives the story's final act. Number 8. Francis Ford Coppola did not want to make The Godfather Part II. This is worth sitting with because the film is now held up as proof that sequels can surpass their originals, but Coppola's reluctance was real, rooted in the experience of making the first Godfather, during which Paramount had pushed him toward being fired on multiple occasions. He had very little desire to walk back into that relationship. His first suggestion was to hand the project to Martin Scorsese, a director he respected and believed was better suited to the material. Paramount rejected the idea. Coppola then negotiated his return with enough leverage to ensure the experience would be different. He secured near-total creative control, kept studio executive Robert Evans away from the production, and negotiated a salary of $1 million, a record-setting figure for a director at that moment. Mario Puzo was brought back to co-write and received $150,000 for the screenplay. The budget grew from approximately $6 million on the first film to around $13 million. Coppola was simultaneously finishing The Conversation that same year, editing one film while shooting another. The control he extracted from Paramount in exchange for returning is exactly why the production held together across multiple countries, parallel timelines, and an expanding cast. He had survived nearly being fired once, and he made certain it could not happen again. The confident authority the film projects on screen is the direct result of a director who refused to be managed twice. All right, we're at the halfway mark, and things are about to get even wilder. Before we hit the top 7, I want to hear from you. What's your favorite The Godfather Part II moment? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel grow. Number 7. Al Pacino had script approval on The Godfather Part II, and he used it. Deep into pre-production, before a single camera had rolled, Pacino read Mario Puzo's draft and decided it was not good enough. He communicated his concerns through his lawyers, telling Coppola that he had grave misgivings and was not prepared to commit to the film as written. For a period, the sequel was genuinely in danger of collapsing before it began, because no other actor could play Michael Corleone. Coppola flew Pacino to his American Zoetrope studio in San Francisco, and the two of them sat down together to work through the script in an intensive session that stretched across a weekend. Coppola restructured and rewrote the material with Pacino's concerns in mind, sharpening Michael's arc and strengthening the parallel between father and son across the two timelines. Pacino approved the revision and agreed to make the film. Years later, Coppola told the story publicly and added a small postscript. He said he eventually asked Pacino whether he had genuinely been prepared to walk away. Pacino replied with disarming directness, "No, I was just trying to get you to rewrite the script and make it better. The anecdote is funny in hindsight, but the stakes at the time were real." The entire production had been suspended over a negotiating position that was really just a creative demand in disguise. The rewrite Pacino produced the Michael Corleone performance that defined an era. Number 6. There is a moment in The Godfather Part II where Frank Pentangeli is being strangled in a back room, and the man doing it leans in and delivers one of the film's most chilling lines. Michael Corleone says hello. Cold, specific, and personal, the line transforms a routine hit into a message from the top. It was not in the script. Danny Aiello improvised it on the spot during one of his earliest film appearances. Aiello delivered the line during the take, and Francis Ford Coppola stopped the scene immediately. He asked Aiello to repeat what he had just said, considered it, and then had him deliver it again with full intent. The improvised version became the final version. Aiello later recalled that he was so focused on nerves, aware he was working on a major production with Coppola, that he did not register saying the line while it was happening. He said he still does not know entirely where it came from. That sense of Michael's reach, the idea that his name alone functions as a weapon, is something the screenplay works to establish throughout the film. A single unscripted moment on one afternoon captured it more precisely than any planned dialogue could have. Michael V. Gozzo's Pentangeli, hearing that name while being strangled, reacts as you would expect a man of his world to react, with the recognition that there is nowhere left to go. Number 5. Gordon Willis did not just photograph The Godfather Part II, he built a visual argument about moral corruption and let it run in the background of every scene. Willis earned the nickname the Prince of Darkness for his willingness to underexpose film to a degree that most cinematographers considered reckless. On the Godfather films, that tendency became the visual signature of the entire saga. As Michael Corleone's conscience disappears, the lighting takes his face with it, pulling his eyes into shadow until the man behind them becomes unreadable. Willis used hard overhead lighting and controlled exposure to engineer that effect deliberately. For the flashback sequences set in the early 1900s, he shifted the palette toward warmer sepia tones to visually separate Vito's world from Michael's. The period precision extended to smallest details. Coppola ordered a scene reshot after spotting an extra in pants with a zipper, which had not been invented during the period the flashback depicted. Willis had initially declined the Godfather films before eventually agreeing, and his approach consistently put him in tension with studios that wanted more visible illumination. On these films, Coppola backed him completely. Production designer Dean Tavoularis built the physical world, and Willis either lit it or deliberately refused to. The moral verdict of the film runs through the electrical grid. When Michael's eyes go dark on screen, Willis made a specific choice to put them there, and every choice was intentional. Number 4. Al Pacino has spoken in interviews about what the role of Michael Corleone cost him physically during the production. While the Cuba sequences were being filmed in Santo Domingo, Pacino became seriously ill with what he described as bronchial pneumonia. The production halted and reorganized around his absence for approximately a month, shooting other material and waiting for their lead actor to be well enough to return to the set. Pacino connected the illness directly to the character he was playing. He described it as a combination of nervous exhaustion and what he called my own need to get away. And in at least one interview, he said plainly that the role had put him in the hospital. The isolation and moral emptiness of Michael Corleone, sustained across an entire production shot across multiple countries and timelines, had worn through the barrier between performance and person. Francis Ford Coppola restructured the shooting schedule around the gap, moving to sequences that could be filmed without Pacino, and returning to the Cuba material once his lead was back on his feet. The physical toll is worth remembering when you watch the later sections of the film, where Michael's face carries a kind of depletion that reads like exhaustion rather than acting. Because at some point during that production, it was both simultaneously. The burnout Pacino felt became the blankness Michael wears in the film's final hour, and the camera caught it without either man needing to manufacture a moment. Number 3. The closing flashback in The Godfather Part II is one of the most emotionally precise endings in American film. The year is 1941. The Corleone brothers gather to surprise their father on his birthday, and Michael sits apart after revealing he has enlisted in the Marine Corps, his first act of independence from the family he will ultimately consume. It is a quietly devastating image. The man who becomes everything, sitting apart from everything he is about to lose. Marlon Brando was supposed to be in that scene. For Part 2, he was in negotiations to appear in the birthday flashback as the younger Vito that the 1941 timeline required. Coppola continued those negotiations right up to the day the scene was scheduled to shoot. Brando, reportedly still furious over his treatment by Paramount on the first film, simply did not arrive. Coppola rewrote the scene that same day to function without Vito ever appearing on screen. James Caan returned as Sonny and, according to production accounts, negotiated a fee for that single sequence equal to what he had earned for his entire role in the original film. Brando's absence accidentally created one of the film's most powerful visual ideas. The shot of Michael sitting alone, the family moving around him without quite reaching him, is more haunting than any paternal presence could have been. The chair at the head of that table is empty for reasons nobody planned. Number 2. The Godfather Part II would not sound like itself without the score that runs through both timelines, pulling them together with the same mournful, inevitable musical gravity. Nino Rota composed the themes, as he had for the first film, and his work is inseparable from what the Godfather saga feels like in memory. There is a painful backstory attached to Rota's relationship with these films that most audiences never know. When Rota's score for the original Godfather received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Score, the nomination was revoked. The Academy discovered that Rota had reused the core melody from his love theme from a 1958 Italian comedy called Fortunella, ruled it insufficiently original, and pulled the nomination. It was a public embarrassment for a composer of his stature, and the decision remained controversial in film music circles for years. For Part 2, Rota returned to carry the established themes forward while composing new material, sharing credit with Carmine Coppola, the director's father. Carmine was a Juilliard-trained musician who had spent decades in orchestras without achieving the recognition his talent warranted. His son's films finally gave him that platform late in life. The sequel's score won the Academy Award for Best Original Score at the 47th Academy Awards. the recognition that had been publicly stripped from Rhoda 2 years earlier. It is one of the quieter acts of redemption in Oscar history, delivered through a composer reclaiming what the Academy had taken back. Number 1. The Godfather Part II is now treated as a masterpiece so settled in its greatness that it is difficult to imagine any other version of its reception. The truth is that just 3 weeks before the film's December 1974 release, the advance word from critics and industry journalists was damaging. The parallel structure, the way Coppola cut between Michael's collapsing present and Vito's rising past, was being called confusing. The film, they said, was a mess. During a preview of an early cut, filmmaker George Lucas told Coppola directly, "You have 2 films. Take one away, it doesn't work." Coppola and his editors went back into the cutting room, trying to sharpen the cross-cutting that was drawing the most criticism. They ran out of time before the release date. The version that reached theaters was the best they could do with the window they had, and early reviews were mixed enough that Paramount had genuine concerns. Then audiences responded, and the critical reassessment followed. At the 47th Academy Awards on April 8, 1975, The Godfather Part II received 11 nominations and won 6 Best Picture, Best Director for Francis Ford Coppola, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Original Score, and Best Art Direction. It became the first sequel in Academy Awards history to win Best Picture. The structure that critics called a mess was the same structure the Academy called the best film of the year. The gamble paid off completely. The Godfather Part II endures because it dared to tell 2 stories at once and let them comment on each other in silence. Behind that surface sat overcast Sicilian skies, a hospitalized leading man, a salary dispute that invented a new character, and one word from an actress that rewrote the film's most devastating scene. None of it was guaranteed. Critics nearly buried it weeks before release. Its villain was rewritten around an actor's failing health. Its most chilling line was improvised out of nerves. The film we call a classic was assembled from compromise and stubbornness. If this video surprised you, drop your favorite fact in the comments. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who loves this movie as much as you do. And as always, this is the business we've chosen. We'll see you next time.